Hey guys, it's Ian. So I've got one more syndicated episode of Comic Timing to put out for you while I'm on vacation and while I'm laptopless. This episode is a little bit different. He's going to reiterate that at the beginning of the episode anyway, but I might as well say it here as I was invited on a longtime listener Matthew Bergren's Wrestling Conversations podcast back in May. This episode came out on May 18th of this year. And we don't just talk about wrestling. We also talk about my history in podcasting, collecting comic books, how I got started in comics, collecting, and it's a nice back and forth conversation. I personally believe that I was very behind the scenes at times, and I always find I'm more relaxed when I'm a guest on a podcast than I am when I'm actually hosting it. So I'm very much at my most relaxed on this one, and Matt's a great host. He had some excellent questions for me, both related to wrestling and comics, and I think this one is well worth checking out if you missed it the last time around. The Wrestling Conversations podcast comes out sporadically. The episode before the one that I was on most recently came out in 2024, but his full back catalog is available on Apple Podcasts and Podcast Addict and a bunch of different places. He's had wrestling luminaries like Scotty Riggs, formerly of WCW, on the show, as well as a bunch of others. So I'm going to run this one on the podcast here so that you guys have listening as we switch over to 2026. Happy New Year, everybody. I hope everybody enjoys their full New Year experience. And as I said, we will be back with a full episode probably next week, more than likely. Stay tuned for that. Not sure what's on the docket yet, whether it's a blue or a gold or somewhere in between. But either way, we are planning on having some sort of 2025 in review episode probably within the next couple of weeks as well. It won't be the familiar format, more than likely. Probably be something a little bit different, but we are definitely going to talk about 2025 in one form or another. So do look forward to that. And look forward to listening to this particular episode of Wrestling Conversations. Like I said, I think it turned out really well, and I think you'll really enjoy it. For those of you who are patrons of the show, we thank you very much for your continued support over at patreon.com/comic timing for as little as $1 a month. I may have some extra audio thrown your way probably before this was released, as I still have a 20-minute piece that Brent and I did pre-episode a couple months back that hopefully I'll have edited by the time I leave. But if not, there's some behind-the-scenes articles from Chris Naudis, some diary entries by me, and any other video and audio we can throw your way. But thank you guys so much for continued support over at patreon.com/comic timing. All right, and with that, here is that episode of Wrestling Conversations. Once again, thank you to Matthew Bergren for having me on. Really, really appreciate it. And on with the show.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Wrestling Conversations. So this episode is going to look a little bit different. In addition to pro wrestling, one of my favorite hobbies is comic books, whether it's Marvel, DC, Image Comics, other independents, so on and so forth. I've been into comics now for probably the last 10 to 12 years, somewhere in there. And the guest of this show is Ian Levinstein. So Ian is a podcaster that produces podcasts about comic books. And he's actually kind of a lapsed wrestling fan that's been getting back into things the last few years here. So we kind of go into kind of him getting back into wrestling, what he watched growing up. But we also get into some comic book discussion, his start in podcasts. He's been doing podcasts for almost 20 years now. So we get into that as well. So please give this conversation a listen. Well, welcome everybody to another episode of Wrestling Conversations. Today, very special guest, Ian Levinstein. Ian, how are you today?
Doing pretty good, Matt. Doing pretty good. Happy to have you. Happy to be here. That is. I'm so used to hosting a podcast. Happy to have you came out of my mouth. But very, 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 very lucky to be here, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And we were kind of talking before we hit record that I make the joke, and I have made the joke on my podcast, like, several times that this is probably the worst wrestling podcast ever because I get so sidetracked with other topics. So I promise for anyone listening to this for wrestling, we will talk some wrestling at some point on this episode. Yes. But Ian's a very interesting guy with lots of things going on. So we'll probably dive into some podcasting, comics, and I guess we'll see where things take us from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, also talking before, like I was kind of like I'm kind of a lapsed wrestling fan who's just getting back into it now. When I was a kid, I was super duper into it. And then once I got far enough into high school and I was like, girls are pretty. It's all of a sudden a regular, Monday night stop to watch, WCW or WWF was not really in the cards for me nearly as much, but I'm kind of redeveloping a taste for it in 2025 of all things. So go figure.
I feel like not everybody, most people, and I think a lot of people I've had on the show talk about whether they're wrestlers themselves or they are people that cover wrestling in some capacity. I feel like everybody has that kind of break period for whatever reason. I think for me, it was, probably like end of like middle school ish. So kind of, probably similar time frame with as far as for whatever the reason of like, okay, just other things are more important. And then I probably took a break for, probably 5 years is all. So I didn't have quite as long of a layoff, but I feel like everybody kind of has that time off. So what was it for you that brought you back at this point?
Well, it's kind of a combination of things, but I know one main thing was actually kind of YouTube. In the YouTube generation, it's so easy to find clips of stuff that you were into when you were younger. At the same time, there's so many different YouTubers doing like retrospectives where they'll do like full biographies of wrestlers that you might have been into, or just things that you used to be into. And I think one of the main ones that really kind of got me back into it was the Wrestling Bios channel on YouTube. Later became a patron and all that jazz. And it's great because like he does a thing called Reliving the War, and every single week it's Nitro and Raw. And at the point where we are right now, as we're recording this, he's almost at the end of the existence of WCW. And like I stopped watching wrestling regularly probably about mid 2000. So I'm now past the point where I was not watching it anymore. And it's fascinating to see just how quickly that fell. Like WCW in its last couple of days, you could definitely understand why it was on its last legs. Like it was not a good product.
Some of those episodes are rough. So I'll be 28 later this year. So I kind of, I started watching wrestling probably like 2001. Like what a time to start. Again, I was,
about the time that I stopped watching it. So
yes. Yes. But I'm such a hardcore wrestling fan that I not only go for the things that I experience and want to rewatch, it's like I want to watch all the stuff that I missed out on. So like I've watched a ton of WCW, even though I kind of like I missed it by, half a generation or something.
Oh, sure. But, yeah.
So, but no, those end days though are, I mean, they're almost entertaining because they're so bad. I mean, there are some bright spots here or there, like in those last couple of years, but the Nitro from like 90, even 95 is not, people say is bad. It's really not that bad, but like 90, 96, 97, 98, there's some really good stuff in there too. Once we get 99, 2000, there are some things that I like, but there's also a lot that I'm kind of like, well, it's a little rough.
I remember I wasn't watching regularly at the time, but I remember I just by pure coincidence happened to be like at home and watching Nitro the night where they were like, and don't bother flipping over to WWF tonight because Mick Foley, that washed up bum, is going to win the WWF title. And I immediately flipped over like everybody else did. And that being the finger poke of doom day, there were a lot of other factors that ruined WCW, but that was definitely the beginning of the end right there. You know, like trying to convince your viewers that they shouldn't watch somebody who you know they were fans of finally get what he deserved when you're literally going to have a match that consists of a finger poke. Like, that's. Oh boy.
Yeah. There was some questionable decisions, and I mean, even going back to watch, like I always heard the stories like before I actually watched it myself of people like of them, like, you know, Eric Bischoff at the top of the show, like, you know, don't bother flipping to the other channel, you know, Shawn Michaels hits the big guy with the super kick, you know, that sort of thing, just to give the spoilers for the previous, you know, for the previous week. But it is like what a crazy time that was. And again, I didn't even experience a lot of that in real time, but just going back to watch, like, and it's been talked about enough that it's like, okay, I have a somewhat of an idea what this will be like. But most of my years until like, there was, you know, TNA and stuff that I, you know, watched a little bit, and but they were never really quite as competitive. And now with mixing in with things with AEW, there's at least more alternatives and stuff. But
that's what got me back into it. That's literally what got me back into it. I feel like it's not quite WCW, WWE, but like it's really close to it, that there's an actual, you know, competitor. There's an actual alternative to WWE. And I legitimately feel like no matter whether I like it or not, WWE is boosted in quality significantly over the past couple of years. And yeah, it's kind of like a wrestling renaissance in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that's been happening for like a bit now. We're kind of starting to see where things are going to go the next, you know, the next 5 years or so. AEW coming was, I mean, for me, I was already pretty heavy back into that, but I got to the point with my wrestling viewing where it's like, okay, I pretty much stopped watching WWE in like 2019. Not that it was, again, it wasn't great. Then there were some bright spots, but it was less that I hated it and more so that it's just like, okay, there's AEW. Like I watched like some Japanese wrestling and, you know, like got into more like independent stuff too. And, so there was just so much that's like, I cannot devote any more time to watching anything, but let alone like I have other things, like I'm a baseball fan. I like to, you know, watch other movies and different series and stuff like that, where it's like, there's only so many hours in the day. And wrestling fans, I don't know if you've experienced this. I'm not sure if you have, have gone on the internet and participated in anything wrestling related. You might, if you haven't, you may want to avoid that.
I have accidentally done so. And there have been moments, some of my fellow podcasters and I live in, you know, New York City, and one of the coolest things that's happened in the past couple of years has been AEW's Arthur Ashe events, the Grand Slam, and I can get to Citi Field ridiculously easy from where I am. So myself and my collaborators, Raf Suhu and Jamal Eigel, have been going to a bunch of these events over the past couple of years, and I remember, I think it was the last one that we went to, where there was a dude sitting behind us that was typical like WWE stan that was like slagging on literally everything that was going on. And at one point, Jamal just turns around and said, "Why are you here? Like, are you seriously going to be doing this all night? Are you just going to be like bad mouthing what's going on literally all night? Because don't." And the guy had this like look on his face, like he like a deer in headlights, like, oh no, someone's calling me out. But quite frankly, have some fun, you know, relax, have a good time. You're there to have a good time, not to slag on it. Sure, if you don't like a match, don't like the match. But if you're there literally just to be like, whoa, man, WWE is so much better, then go to a WWE event. Don't bother. Like, come on.
And it's like and unless someone bought his ticket, and like you are also paying to be here.
Exactly.
And ticket prices in 2025 are pretty expensive. I mean, even AEW is not on the level of like how expensive WWE tickets have been. It's still like, it's still not a small amount of money. Even if it was $10, like you paid this company money to come watch them. You're not really getting the last laugh here, I guess. So, I mean, all for having opinions doesn't mean you have to love everything, but it's like, I've heard people say it this way, like when people get riled up, it is, you know, two guys in their underwear play fighting. This is what we're getting upset about.
Yes.
Like, this is make believe. Like
I'm a watcher of RuPaul's Drag Race as well, and I am fully aware that I am basically watching drag for guys. Like, like that is absolutely the case. I mean, it was that case long before anyway. I mean, come on, Gold Dust, but
right.
But like it is a male soap opera. We are watching a male soap opera. Even the women's is still oriented that way, one way or the other. For guys and girls, and you just got to sit back and relax and enjoy the show. That's it. I mean, you're not going to love every single storyline that's going on, but I mean, you're there for the entertainment factor. If you're not being entertained, don't go. Plain and simple.
Yeah. That is. I haven't had too many and I live right on the Minnesota North Dakota border. North Dakota border. So, the closest place. I grew up in Minnesota, but now I live in Fargo, North Dakota.
Nice.
We so I grew up, not here, but I live here now. So you're right. Our house is as close to the river as you can be, right? As close to the border as you can be, basically. And we don't have a lot of, there's a local indie that actually is pretty good, which is surprising because historically, independent wrestling in the Dakotas has been just awful. Hence, look at the population. Just if you head that direction, there's just not much there in general. But, Fargo will get some events, but it's mostly Minneapolis. So that probably skews my perspective because I will travel, but it's not like I travel every time someone comes to town because that's a 4.5 hour drive for me to get to Minneapolis at this point. So I probably don't have a ton of live event experience compared to other people that live in Chicago or wherever. But I haven't had that many bad experiences. I did get COVID at an indie show. I was not too happy about that, which I get it. It happens, but it's that's the worst thing I've had. But no, there are some crazy people, but none that's been in my vicinity, which I've been very thankful for because you kind of go in expecting at least a little bit of that. But
I was at the Meadowlands for a recent AEW pay-per-view. And I'd say the experience with the fans wasn't bad. The overall experience was so. Not nearly as good an experience as I had even I went to UBS for God, I'm blanking on the name now, but when the Japanese wrestlers and the American wrestlers all get together.
Oh, was that Forbidden Door?
Forbidden Door. Thank you. Yeah, that was a great experience. When I went to New Jersey, I got these tickets off of Theater Extras. So they were basically seat filler seats, which I knew going in was going to be the situation. I knew I was going to be sitting upstairs and I was okay with that. It's just that they didn't properly jack in the public address system, so we couldn't hear anything that was being mic'd. And not once did they had an overhead scoreboard they could have easily been showing the matches on, and they never actually turned that on for matches the entire time. It took them a little while at World's End, but they eventually did it. At this one, no, nothing at all. And that was a subpar experience, not a fan experience, but a subpar production experience that I had. But I paid $20 for the tickets. So what do you expect?
Hey, that's not bad. That's not bad. I really want to make it to, again, because of where I'm located, there's not a lot of Chicago. They run there so often that's I could make that drive. It's just to drive 8 hours is kind of I don't know if I'm willing to do that.
Absolutely.
Which they had one pay-per-view in Minneapolis. I think it was, I want to say it was, must have been 21 because it's not 20 because they didn't run live for most of that year. I think it was 21 that was Full Gear in Minneapolis. And I really wanted to go, but at that point in time, my wife and I just finished up. We were both in grad school at the time. And so money was not flowing. So I'm probably can't go. So just the wrong timing, but we made it to Dynamite the next year after we finished up and had a little more money coming in. So, but hopefully if they would get another pay-per-view, I don't know that they did super great ticket wise. So I'm I don't expect them to be back because they have to run the Target Center. And it's
sure. Yeah.
I kind of just don't know if they have the market for it. I don't know, but hopefully at some point they'll come back. But so was it when you kind of got back in, you mentioned the YouTube kind of back into things. So what led you to check out current wrestling?
So mostly friends of mine. I have a really good friend of mine that I've known for years. His name is David, and he's full blown like wrestling diehard.
Mm-hmm.
So's Raph, so's Jamal, and I would basically like through osmosis, know things that were going on and stuff like that. And there were a couple of instances where somebody bailed on David last minute, and he was like, "Do you want to go?" And one of which was actually one of the NXT takeovers that took place in Brooklyn. And I jumped on the train and I joined for that, and I had a really great time. That was in the kind of like the super heyday of NXT, where it was really being presented as something new and fresh. It is now, but like it's much more of like a third brand now. Like it was kind of even been like its own thing, like back when Shinsuke was holding the belt and stuff like that. And that was like one of the first major wrestling events I've been to, and I can't tell you how long. We also did like this random like event at a nightclub in Queens at a place called La Bam. And it was an organization that was associated with the WWE, but wasn't actually WWE. So like one or two people showed up. I had no idea who they were, but like David told me, "Oh, just so you know, that guy's a WWE mid carder." Like, okay, great. And like I remember the last match of the night, they literally took the mats off and were fighting on the wood of the ring, and that was enough for me to be like, that is so crazy, it just might work. And it was ridiculous, but it had me intrigued enough. Then NXT got me a little bit more intrigued, and then slowly but surely it trickled in and got me more into what was happening present day. But I'm still not a week to week watcher. Like I'll check out random episodes of Dynamite or now that Raw's on Netflix, I can easily check that out when I want to. But mostly it's just clips on YouTube because they're all going to wind up on there anyway. So might as well get the highlights that way, one way or the other.
I think that's the way. Honestly, from someone that has been really into like wrestling and has watched a ton the last I think. For sure, the last 10 years I've been pretty heavy, but the last couple I've tried to scale back, and honestly, I think it's better that way. It's just like because everything feels a little bit more fresh, and I think when there's just so much of it, like if you picked one company and you watched WWE, it's like you have Raw, SmackDown, NXT, pay-per-views, like that's enough to occupy your time anyway. So like if you want to watch, like I just cherry pick, like I watch more of AEW, New Japan, like those are kind of my top two favorites. And then I watch the WWE pay-per-views, but I think like for me, that is the thing, like just not feel too attached to the week to week shows. I think that's kind of the way, I think that's kind of how you have to do it because you just can't watch it all.
Oh, of course not. Yeah, and there's so much other good stuff to watch these days. I mean, as a podcaster, I mean, you talk about how like you made the joke that like you're a wrestling podcast, but you talk about things that aren't wrestling so much that might not even be at work. I'm a comic book podcaster, and 3/4 of the time I'm talking about TV because there's just so much good television to watch these days, whether it's geek related or otherwise. Like that's where a lot of my time goes, plus movies. I have AMC A-list, so I'm at the movies at least once or twice a month. There's just so much content to consume. To sit down and watch a 3-hour show every single week from start to finish is just not something that I'm willing to do, or capable of doing, quite frankly. So, use your time how you can take it,
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think like, I'm the person that like, I don't like, I have a wife and I have a dog and I have a house, but I don't have kids at this point. And it's like, I have two sisters. One has 5 kids, one has 4. And, I'm like, if I have kids, my time is going to diminish and I already don't have enough time to do all the things. So I'm like, I'm just prepping myself for, even if I don't have kids, just the amount of things that's like, I want to do.
But also, just life gets in the way. Yeah. That's exactly what it is. And not once, kids or no kids, like, family, whatever, like obligations take the front and center, over, random stuff that you could do at any time.
Mm-hmm.
And that is literally what, WWE or AEW is to me. It's like, like doing the dishes, pop it on my phone, have it dangle on top of my fridge so I can see the screen while I'm doing dishes and watch a batch or two. Like that's, something to kill the time with, or a vignette on the history of Shawn Michaels versus Triple H or something like that. Like whatever is available to you. It's just a good time killer of the in-betweens and not necessarily appointment television. So yeah.
No, absolutely. I think that's the way to do it. My list of things to watch right now is so like long, or I have, people that I know will like, oh, did you watch this? I'm like, no, I really want to. And it's like, well, why haven't you done it? It's like, well, there's just so many things that it's like, I only have so much time to watch or to consume entertainment of any form. It's like, well,
Absolutely.
you get about, maybe an hour or two every night where it's like, you can do that after you get home for the day and do all your responsibilities and all those things. But
yeah.
So you mentioned podcasting before we got on. You mentioned that. So for comic timing, you said this was it the 19th anniversary, like to the day?
To the day as we're recording this right now. I may theoretically be off by a day or two just because like there was an original website and then there was where it wound up being after that. But about 99% certain that May 1st is the day that episode 1 was released. Literally 19 years ago as we're recording this, which is crazy to me that podcasts are that old at this point. So old that I was talking about this the other day with some friends of mine, and the term podcast is literally for a piece of technology that nobody uses anymore.
Yep.
The iPod,
Yep.
like, we've been using phones for so long now that the term is antiquated, but it's such a ubiquitous term that, what are you going to call it? Like, I mean, I remember Leo Laporte back in the day tried to turn it into netcasts. This Week in Tech, another podcaster that's been around for forever, he tried to make that take off, and it just doesn't roll off the tongue like a podcast does. So 19 years, crazy, man.
So that would have been, so that's 2000. I'm trying to do mental math here. 2006.
Yep.
At that point, I don't remember if it probably would have been around that time because I had an iPod and I remember coming up like, what are podcasts? I don't know. I was not on the cutting edge of even knowing what they were. At that point, like, now any person that like wants to do a podcast could, you could do a quick Google search and probably figure out like how to not do it well, but like how to, like, you could record something on your phone if you didn't have a mic.
Literally just hold it up like this and record. Yep. I've done that on a few, like extra points I put out where I didn't feel like setting up my equipment, and it's a comparable mic. It's not a great mic, but it's comparable to like my actual, professional setup. Yeah. And back in the day, God, I had the luck when I first started. Before Comic Timing, before my main podcast, I did a solo show called Geek Speak. I know, creative. I completely thought nobody could possibly have that name, and then I did a Google search afterwards, and like 15 people had the name, whatever. It was a college radio show, actually. I was a TV radio major, and I recorded it in a professional radio studio for my college at Brooklyn College. And I would then make an MP3 out of it, put it on the internet. And this was before iTunes even had podcast capabilities. So people had to use podcatchers, they called them, to download the episodes and then transfer them over to like whatever, MP3 device you were using, or just listen to it on your computer. And then I got like a rudimentary ass desktop microphone, like a USB microphone, and it sounded like trash. And that was what I first started off with until I eventually upgraded and, upgraded over the years. And, now I use an actual mixer and I use an actual microphone and have been for years now. But I listened to some of those early episodes where I attempted to use my own mic and software to record off of Skype.
Yep.
Because that's all you had.
Right.
That's all you had back in the day was Skype. And there was a program called Hot Recorder we would use. And I lost, I think, 3 episodes to Hot Recorder over the years because the minute it crashed, that's it. And it was the only way to really do it until I eventually switched over to using hardware to record my episodes instead. With a line in and, sending it out to that. And that saved my bacon so many times. And it kind of, was the progenitor of how I still record today. And it's crazy how much technology has improved. It's crazy how much microphones have improved. It's crazy how much the medium of podcasting has improved. Like the fact that we're on video right now and recording video and releasing it as video and audio. That's something I couldn't have even dreamed of in 2006. And lo and behold, here we are. So it's really insane how far we've come.
No, definitely. I was going to ask you that too, because I thought that because I wasn't sure like what you did for like what you went to school for, what you do for a job, stuff like that. But I'm like, there has to be some sort of like media training. Cause like you just have the voice for it, where I'm just like, I don't know, maybe that's practice. Maybe this is just my voice. I had Paul, his name is Paul Bromwell. He does a now that I don't think they're running anymore, but he did a podcast with Kurt Angle. So he was on my show, and he kind of has like, I'm like, you have a radio voice. And he's like, well, I wasn't trained. I said, I do a lot of talking for my job, but it's just so, but even for those types of things, I think that, again, I am not good at podcasting. I do talk for my job, but it's not something I feel like I take pride in, like, oh, the way I present information is really great or anything like that. But for you, like, do you feel like over the years, like your delivery has changed, or do you feel like that's something that you are even conscious of at this point after 19 years?
It's funny you say that, because I've listened to some of my older episodes, and I can see that when I was in college and I was told this is the cadence you should use. Try your best not to have ums. Try your best not to have If you have them, try your best to cut them out. And, this is spacing. Take your pauses when you need them. Blah, 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 blah. And that was how I was trained. When I listened to those first couple of episodes, it sounds professional, but it also sounds a little bit canned. Yeah. Because that's what I was aiming for. Like I was a TV radio major, like, that's what radio is. But you listen to a guy on the radio, he's going to he's going to, there's going to be weird pauses in there. It's just all part of like the banter and the general flow of it all. You saying that you're not a good podcaster, quite frankly, you got to this step, man. Like you got to putting out episodes. The fact that you haven't pod faded after 2, because trust me, I've seen tons of people where that happened over the years. Friends of mine, collaborators of mine, hi Raph, hi Brandon, where they put out 4 or 5 episodes and then life gets in the way, and then there's not much you can do about it. But the fact that you are where you are now says that you're a podcaster and you're going to keep on rolling. With me, 19 years, Comic Timing is about to hit its 250th episode. Think about that. 19 years, 250 episodes. I know people who have put out 1,600 episodes in that span. And I could have did that, but I also understood that life exists. Yeah. Same thing we're talking about with the wrestling here. Like, you can't always have an episode a week because stuff's going to get in the way. Plus I had other obligations that fell in there, other podcasts that I was a part of for a little while that, stopped production in one way or another. But what it comes down to, yes, listening to those early episodes, I did what I could with what I had. And really, it all depends on the flow, the personality, and the people you have on more than anything else in order to become a successful podcast. Like, I consider myself a podcaster, even like not even a successful podcaster, because I like doing it. Like I don't even care about the numbers or anything like that. I just want to get together and hang out with my friends, and then we put out an episode, and that's kind of what we're doing right now. Brent, Chris, Raph, Brandon, Jamal, like that group, or Chris Eberly, Adam Murdo, Shane, myself, like we're just getting together and having a good time talking, and then release it as an episode. And if it works, great. If it didn't, it's out there. So nothing you can do about it after that.
And that's what I think about. I mean, obviously you've done a lot more with podcasting than myself, but it's just like, I do it strictly just for fun. Cause it's like, well, day-to-day life, do I get to talk about the things that, I mean, like there are people that tolerate it. Like
Yeah.
Like my wife knows more about wrestling than she ever thought she would because I talk about it, or comics or whatever, or I got a wall full of action figures and stuff. So I'm like, I give it the disclaimer. She did know what she was getting into before she married me. So I will tell everybody that, because she did know. But it's just another way that it's like I can talk to people about things that I enjoy. That's like day to day. Do I talk to people about wrestling? Probably not. It's just like, I think some of that is, it's hard to find people with similar interests, but also, I think just some of its proximity where I live too is just like, there are a lot of people in Fargo that like wrestling. There are some, but not my closest friends, I guess. But so it's just a way that I can, you can talk about things that you enjoy. And I kind of like having a project to work on too, where it's just like, I can think about who could I have on next, or what's this idea I could have for this next episode, stuff like that. So I think that's really, and there are people that do it and like, make money at it and stuff like that. But it's just, for me, it is the love of the things that we're talking about.
Yes.
Right now. So at that point, because that was 2006.
Yep.
I'm trying to think of where I was. So at 2000, I was born in 97. So that would have been the time that I probably discovered Yes. So that's the point where I probably I remember I don't know which iPod it was.
Yeah.
But I had an iPod and I came across podcasts. And I think at that point, it was not the first iPod I had. I had it was the first one that had video. And I think I downloaded maybe an episode of some sort of animated show who was something Batman related or something like that. So I was searching like Batman or Spider-Man in the podcast. I didn't know what they were. And then I figured out that it was just audio, and I was like, oh, this isn't cool, whatever. But come to find out, I give it a few years and it's just like, I really hit that trend hard. But kind of what even led you to obviously it makes sense with your background in school, but how did the podcast route at that point, when it wasn't such a common thing, what kind of opened that path for that to even be like a thought to happen?
So I had a friend of mine that I was originally doing, my progenitor podcast, Geek Speak, as a radio show with in my college. And he's the one who first told me about podcasts at the time. And again, this is before iTunes even had the capabilities. So again, this is really, really early on. Yeah. And he was like, I want to try to do a podcast. Like, okay, all right. We'll see how it goes. And just by schedule and by, life getting in the way, he didn't wind up joining me for the next semester with Geek Speak. And I did it solo. And I'm like, it's not a bad idea. So I got a cheap, hosting plan with a website. And I basically recorded what I was doing as a WAV file, and then converted it to MP3, and then uploaded it via FTP onto the internet. And I used very rudimentary, I think it was a blog spot to create an RSS feed, which could then be sent out to everybody, and went from there. I also personally didn't actually own an iPod until an iPod Touch. I was one of those assholes that was like, no, I'm not going to let Apple take my money. Even to this day, I still own an Android, so go figure. But I have an iPad, so it's like half in the bag, half out. But I had a ZenVision M. It was a creative ZenVision M. It was like the biggest iPod alternative at the time. Like instead of doing QuickTime videos, it did AVIs. Instead of doing Apple encoded, it did WMAs. Like all this alternative, and that's what I used for my personal player at the time. And I just searched for other shows like you did. Like I searched on a podcast website. I think it was called Podcast Alley was the name of it, where you could rank and rate your shows at the time. And I literally put in comic books, and I found a whole bunch of different comic book podcasts, and it got me the idea there. I became a part of a couple of different communities, the early days of the, Comic Geek Speak forums at the time and all that. And I made a couple friends. And at about a year into it, a guy by the name of Toby Cook came to me and was like, do you want to do a podcast? And I'm like, all right, I'm already doing one. I might as well do one where I don't have to just talk to myself. And that's how we started Comic Timing. And within the first 3 or 4 episodes, he had to drop out. And I'm like, all right, I guess I'll take on the hosting gig. And at the time, my co-host was David Price, who's since moved on to at the time Bullpen Bulletins and now 11 O'Clock Comics. He's still in the podcasting game with Vince B and Jason Wood over there. I then wound up with another podcast co-host by the name of Matt Summer. He then went on to do a actually incredibly successful at the time Office fan podcast called That's What She Said. And to the point where he even had actual members of the Office cast on at times. And they did an episode by episode breakdown until they got tired of the show and then moved on from there. And how I found Brent, who's my, longtime co-host, he was just a fan. And he was like, hey, I like what you're doing. And one day I was like, hey, we need a third. You want to come on? Like, okay, cool. And he came on and he basically never left. And when you talk about wanting to talk to people in other areas and stuff like that, he's in Florida. So I live in New York. He lives in Florida. Brandon lives in Philadelphia. Raph, I met through the scene, so he's in Manhattan. So here I can see him here and all that. But a bunch of my other collaborators are all across the country and stuff like that, because that's what you can do with the internet. That's what you can do with podcasting, and it really opened me up to meet new and interesting and unique people that I wouldn't have met otherwise that are into the same similar things. So it was it's been a real interesting road. I'll tell you that much.
Definitely. I think I first heard you. I think it was, so here's the route that I found. I was listening to Comic Geek Speak, heard you there, and then followed you over from that point too. And that'll forever be and I listened to it previously. I think Pants was the main host at the time. I don't know if he was right before. Was he right before you?
Pants was the main producer.
Yes.
Directly before me, after Jamie passed.
Yes.
After Jamie passed, Pants kind of went back into the driver's seat for a little while, and then Adam Murdo stepped in out of necessity to drive the ship for a little while, and then kind of just fell in and happened. And I was in the driver's seat there for about 6 years, give or take.
I think I had started in the Pants era, and then when you came on, and then I followed you to Comic Timing too. But I think that'll always be one of in my head when I think of comic podcasts groups. I think one of them that I always think of is you, Adam, Chris, Shane. That forever will be one of in which I was so happy to hear that everyone's kind of been reforming on Comic Timing too.
Yeah.
I think Chris Eberly is my favorite person that I've never met. I think that's
I'll let him know that. He'll get a kick out of that. Yeah.
That's the way that I would describe that. He's
what a knowledgeable human being. I oh my God. Well, and Murr too, for that matter.
Oh, yes.
Both of them. I just sit back. I was lucky enough this last weekend. Sir Eberly had a gathering at his house, and we all got to see each other for the first time in about 2 years.
Oh, sure.
And at times I would just sit back and just bathe in the glory, as Chris would put it, of the two of them just riffing off each other, going back and forth on facts that I would never be able to keep in my brain, that somehow Murd and Chris have at the ready. It's insane.
Yeah, Chris is and I've loved everyone from that crew. I have very much enjoy, because I think that was so I started in the Pants era, but that was the first comic podcast I'd ever listened to. And I was born in 97, and where I live, we didn't have a comic shop. That didn't exist. So I didn't, in the city I live in now, there's two shops. So I'm spoiled from my upbringing, but where I live, there was nothing. So I had over time had gotten a couple books as a kid, and I enjoyed them, but there just wasn't an avenue to get more.
So was your only avenue Barnes and Noble and stuff like that, or? We
didn't have that. I grew up in a small town of less than now it's grown. I grew up in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota, and it's a very big touristy spot where it's small town. The people that are locals at the time when I grew up, there was probably about 7,000 people. Now there is probably 10. In the summer, there's probably more like 30, because there's people from out of town that have lake houses. So it's just a big lake area. And so we had a local bookstore. that would carry, eventually would carry some like I'm talking like less than 10 trades at a time. And that's it. And then that eventually closed. But I think I'd gotten a couple comics here or there, always enjoyed them. There just never was an avenue to get more. So I did not get into comics like consistently until I was probably, I don't know, 15, 16 maybe. So, and again, I'm probably 28 here coming up. So hasn't really been that long, but that's when I could order. And then I moved, and then there was a comic shop, and then everything happened where it just snowballed from there.
Right.
But yeah, I think so it's still like, I think compared to like my knowledge of comics, like there's lots of things like wrestling. I know a lot more comics I'm gaining, but it's like when you have someone like yourself or someone like Adam or Chris or Shane or people from your show on Comic Timing now that just are, whether they, I mean, you're talking decades and decades and decades of reading that I'm just like, I feel like I know absolutely nothing, but that's okay.
It's like when I allow myself to just sit back and let Raph and Jamal tell me everything about Superman that I never needed to know, because either one of them are more of a Superman nerd than the other. I mean, one of them literally has drawn Superman for a living, so like that's Jamal, and like he, I mean, the man's drawn Supergirl, like he's worked for DC and all that jazz, so like he's got that going for him. Raph, I don't know how this man has as much Superman knowledge as he does. Oh, right, because he just did nothing but do Superman and Ninja Turtles for like a decent amount of his existence, and the wealth is there, the knowledge is there, man, and I'm glad to have people around me that soak up this stuff more than I do, because like I read and I love it and I enjoy it, but like it's the people with the dedication and the devotion to either specific characters or, DC or Marvel or whatever that like really drive it home. That's why I like being the host. You know, like I can sometimes just sit back and let somebody else talk, and it's a wealth of knowledge in front of you in that way. And I absolutely love it, and it's some of the best times that I have just letting that happen. But comics too, man, like they're so much more accessible now than they were, even you're talking about 96, 97 and not having a shop. Now with the digital era of being able to go to Kindle store. God, I miss Comixology with a passion. Or Marvel Unlimited or DC Infinite, like you have these avenues where you have, millions and millions of comic books literally at your fingertips to be read at any time, whether you're researching or whether you just want to open up a random book, like you can do it. It really is just like a crazy turn of events that it's just that much easier now than it was back when you were a kid, back when I was a kid. It's really something.
And the irony is now that I read zero digital comics, zero. I just can't. And I think that is probably, I think most people are surprised by that, just with my age and background of like, I wasn't really, I didn't have the shops. I wasn't tied to that experience of being, I go every Wednesday, I get my books. I do that now, but it's just at the time, it wasn't something that I had, like, wasn't just this habit. It was, I had both options, and I'm like, and not that I'm all for if they can, make things accessible for people that like if you could read that and that was your gateway, like I would have, as a kid, I would have 100% probably, if I would have had that opportunity, I would have dove in to the digital realm, because just out of necessity of like, well, I have, I've got a device I could use, but not an actual shop. But now I think partially it is, I have tried a couple times. I do need a new iPad. So like my old iPad is just, it hardly works. It's not supported. You can't update anything. So I think if I tried something else, my brother recently kind of got back into comics after like a 10-year kind of layoff, and he went the digital route, and he's like, this is the best thing ever. It's so great. And I'm like, oh yeah. I hate trying to find old things that are out of print and all of that. So like there's times where I'm tempted, but I just like, I spend so much of my day on a computer screen that I just like to have something physical. But maybe one day I'll change. I just need to get the new iPad.
Well, and also it's a space thing for me as much as it is anything else. Like I live in New York City in a 1-bedroom apartment. Like I do not have the space to continue to be a single issue buyer. And at one point there every single week. Like I have a long history of every Wednesday going to the shop, picking up my singles, falling behind by months, not caring, continuing to buy, falling further behind, being like, I should really sit down and catch up, read 12 issues, then I'm still 12 issues behind. Like that was my that was my life for a very long time. And until out of necessity, basically, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I stopped buying from DCBS. That's how I was getting my main shipments every month, and I just went straight up digital from there. And I'll buy trades, because I mean, sometimes that's just the easier way to do it, especially for independent books. But Marvel and DC's apps, DC Infinite Ultra, it's a month delay. A month delay. That's it.
It's kind of it's hard to when it's if it's something is 6+ months, whatever. Like that's something I'm like, oh, but and I think that's where I'm going to start like considering stuff like that, because I'm looking over at my stack of books in the corner off camera over there, and trust me, in most titles I am behind more than a month, I think, and just about every title I have on my list.
As long as you're not 20 years behind like Murd, then you're still okay. But God bless him. Like I think he's up to 2008 or 2009 at this point in his reading. But yeah, it really is a lot to keep up in that way, and then be like, I have this pile and it's not getting smaller.
No, absolutely. Yeah, it's. And I'm the person that I don't have 50 titles a month I'm getting. I try to keep it manageable. A, for cost. B,
sure.
I think space too, because I'm running into that where I haven't been collecting forever, but I've got enough that it's like, okay, this is starting to take up some space. I collect a bunch of other things, so luckily I have a room dedicated to all the junk that I do. So but like once that space is up, there's no more to just like put other things, so. Yep. We're going to have to make some decisions at some point, and I think there could come a day. So I'm going to keep running this route for a little while, but that's a good way to put it, where I didn't realize it was only a month. I'm not sure when that switched, but it's...
Yeah. There's two tiers of DC's digital platform. One is a 3-month delay, and then there's what they call Ultra.
Yeah.
And then Ultra is a 1-month delay, and you also get access to a whole bunch of digital collections. So like basically digital trades, digital hardcovers. So you're not having to, hunt down all 12 issues of something that you want to read. They literally just upload a copy of what that trade is, and then you're able to read it that way. Marvel is 3 months behind with Unlimited. They don't have a higher tier than that. It used to be 6 months, but during COVID, they had no alternative because there were no books coming out. So they just, released a whole bunch of books, and they wound up, catching up by 3 months, and they just stuck with it. So it's now a 3-month delay with Marvel. And even that, like, it's 3 months is nothing. It's so easy to be further behind than that. So you might as well, embrace it if you don't have the space for it.
Yeah. I think, I said 1 month. I mean, there are several titles I'm like, I'm a lot more than 3 months behind of just like, why am I even buying this book anymore? And I need to go through my list, and it's just always like, oh, I would like to. And that's the problem with you buy the singles. And it's like, well, not that you couldn't find it, but it becomes a pain to track it down later. If I want to read this, I might as well buy it now. But it's just a never ending cycle though, because those titles are going to just, most of them, well, even if they, restart at number 1 for the big titles, like they're going to continue no matter what. No matter what happens, absolutely. Batman will always be there. So
100%. Yes.
So at this point, I've always enjoyed all of whether it's the Comic Geek Speak crew that joined over on Comic Timing, or the other crew that you've got going. I've always enjoyed the cast of characters that you guys have going. So I think you brought up Jamal. Jamal is always a fun kind of perspective to hear with his background and all the things. So how did you two kind of get linked up?
So we met through the general CGS community, actually.
Okay.
And both of us being from New Yorkers, like we kind of bonded over that, and we'd see each other at shows and stuff like that, and then just actually meeting in person and conversing and getting to know each other better, that would then equal online. And I had him on as a guest a couple of times over the years, and the friendship just blossomed from there to the point where there was an event that happened at one point that Jamal drove me and Raph back from Pennsylvania from, and he survived, and that proved that that he was more than worthy to continue to talk to us because we didn't drive him crazy. But yeah, that a lot of the friendships that I've made over the years have either been through one comic book community online or another, and a lot of that was like the very early. There used to be a thing called the comic forums that was created by CGS initially, but then there was a larger community that formed from there. And that's how I met a lot of the people in the comic book community and industry that I still know to get today, like the Mike Nortons of the world, Sean Pryor, Dave Dwanch, and so on and so forth. Like all them, basically it was a giant community. And now like you find more of that stuff on like Discord and stuff like that these days, but forums were a godsend back in the early 2000s and 2010s, where you were able to just find people just like what we were talking about earlier that may not necessarily be from where you're from but are into similar interests, and maybe somebody that you want to talk to more. And Jamal definitely was one of those people, and I'm happy to call him one of my closest friends in the community at this point. And just so happens that he's also a giant wrestling nerd, and kind of just like evolved from there. That couple times a year we get together and go to an event, and I had him over at my place with David actually to watch the Rumble back in January, and that was a lot of fun. So yeah, it's just typical evolution of knowing people, basically.
Definitely. And I always enjoy his perspective on things, and he just there's just more and more stuff that he's doing all the time. So it's just cool to see how things have kind of progressed for him too. And I really enjoyed your interview with Jeremy that you had recently. That was really good. He comes across as such a likable guy too.
Oh my God, he really is. He's one of the, and I mentioned it on the episode, but like it's one of the few times that someone found me and not the other way around on the floor of New York Comic Con. I happened to be walking around the Artist Alley. This was I think it was maybe 2 years ago, and I suddenly get a tap on the shoulder, and it's like Ian, and I turn around and I'm like, oh crap, it's Jeremy Adams. He's like, hey man, how you doing? I'm like, great. You know who I am? Like, yeah, we're Facebook friends. Like, okay, great. And conversation bloomed from there. And then at when the announcement came that he was newly DC exclusive, I got a press release on it, and they were like, if you're interested in interviews, let me know. And I messaged back saying, I literally know who this man is. We met in person. Let's get an interview going. And one of the most personable people that I have ever interviewed in a podcast setting. Another one of those situations where I could just sit back and let him talk, and there's always going to be a great story. Like the story he told about being on the line to get ice cream in San Diego, and a guy literally died in front of him, and that was the first time he was ever recognized.
That was a crazy story.
The list goes on and on. Great guy, excellent creator. Every comic he puts out is just as good as the next, and I found that a lot of creators in the comic book industry are super approachable. You just got to approach them, and luckily this one approached me, so go figure.
Absolutely. I think I think when I try to do my podcast, I think it's different in my case because of, I think, one of two things. I think first off, it is that being new, everyone I've ever had on has always been super nice, because for someone that hasn't done this for, hundreds of episodes, like you kind of have to they have to weigh that risk reward of like, okay, well, I go on and this thing, at least there's episodes out there that they could check out and like, okay, this is actually is a real thing. And, hopefully I don't come across as some weirdo or anything like that. Like there's not anything happening there, but of just like, in comics to maybe an extent, it's always like about promotion though. Like for people, like, okay, what can I do? I have something to talk about. Like if I interview an independent wrestler, like there's some that are really into it. Some of them are just like, this is not big enough for me to participate in if you do ask stuff
Mhm.
like that.
Yeah.
But I feel like for the most part, for me, if it's somebody that says yes, generally it's going to be a good experience because they know what they're getting into and they're like, okay, this is great. Obviously for, someone like you, I don't know if that's ever a guarantee because if you have people approaching you, like, like they're just doing the rounds and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I think for the most part, most comic creators that like if from like a listener standpoint, things always usually come across like they're just so interesting to talk to and their perspective where it's just my brain doesn't maybe work that way. Or I'm strictly a fan of like, oh, just kind of like, I'm just so fascinated about like the thought process behind same thing for wrestling too. Like what goes into making a match, what goes into making a comic.
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
that's always super
Yeah.
interesting to me.
Well, and I go by a philosophy, or at least I try to. Like when I'm in front of a mic, I can't stop talking, but I am in real life. I do have a little bit of social anxiety, and if I'm walking around a convention by myself, I'm a lot more likely to be a little bit more of a shut in than I would be if I'm walking around with people that I already know.
Mhm.
I may be more likely to approach you. But going back to something that that Jamie D of Comic Geek Speak used to say that I always took to heart is, don't be afraid to go up to somebody and say, I really like your work. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Even if you're not looking to get an autograph, even if you're not looking to have a long conversation with them, even if you're not looking to buy something from them, if you happen to approach them and they're not busy at the time, go over, thank them for what they're doing, and maybe you'll start a conversation from there, or maybe it'll just be a thank you and you're moving on. Because two things: one, you don't know how long they're going to be around.
Yeah.
And unfortunately with Jamie, that was the case as well. Like I was super happy to know him when I did. And I take that philosophy to heart. Number two is a lot of creators, podcasters included, appreciate hearing from people that are fans of them, and again, even if it's just a quick hello, goodbye type of situation, like a thank you really goes a long way. And it kind of reminds you that people are listening and that people are available and people are out there and are interested in what you're doing. So it's, I don't know how many conventions you go to and stuff like that, but like I haven't missed a New York Comic Con since it started. It's one of my favorite things to do as an extracurricular, but really going around and just saying your thank yous when you have the opportunity to do so. You never know when it's going to start a new relationship, or you never know when you're just going to make somebody's day that way. So it goes a long way. It really does.
Going to like conventions, you bring that up, and that's another example of like there's not many around. But I mean, like you could just like everything else. I mean, I promise anyone that's listening, there are good reasons to live where I live. Part of it was because I was born in the area, but I think with anything like that, the things that we're talking about, not really a hotbed for. If you want to go to some lakes and enjoy some outside time, okay, I got you covered. But I am very jealous of people that have. And again, it's just like anything else. There's pros and cons. Me growing up where I lived, if I had to all of a sudden move to New York, that would be super difficult for me.
Same. If you were to stick me in the middle of a bunch of lakes, I like being able to walk to the store. That's one of my favorite things in the world. And whenever I'm taken away from that for more than like a week and a half, I have no idea what the hell to do with myself.
Yeah. And it's just, I think you could just get used to, what you're used to. I have, let's see, like for example, our like public transportation, like where I grew up, like that basically doesn't exist. Like it doesn't, like you're driving, and we lived like out of city limits. My mom's yard was like a couple acres, that sort of thing, where just like you had neighbors, but it's like they were a long way away. Even now I live in like Fargo is not it's not huge, but there's 3 small cities that connect, and if you add them all up together, it's at like we're probably 200,000. So it's bigger than what people think, but it's not New York, it's not Minneapolis, it's not anything even remotely close to that. But even in Fargo, it's big enough that we could use something different. But like there's a bus system, but at my job, I have some patients that take the bus to come see me, and they kind of tell me like how long it takes for the bus to like, oh, I got to leave an hour early compared to if I was driving, to be able to, and we're not traveling far distances here. It has a schedule, but it's not quite the infrastructure that a New York is going to have. But
you're gonna laugh when I say this. I am 41 years old. I just got my driver's license at the age of 41. In May of this past year, I got it, and well, actually, no, I'm sorry. I got the license at 40. At 41, I now have a car for the first time in my life. And I never needed it, but now I'm like, I may want to go places that are not necessarily within the distance of public transit, or would take me an hour and a half less if I had a car and an opportunity to do so. Mm-hmm. Where I am in New York is situated far enough out of I'm basically the tip of New York City.
Sure.
So there's actual parking here. If I lived in Manhattan, hell no.
Right.
But where I am, I can get by, and I'm now kind of understanding the other part of existence where you need a car or you ain't going nowhere.
Yeah, that is such a foreign concept to me. And I've talked to people that live in other states and stuff, and sometimes that comes up with, it's just such a departure with, in Minnesota, legal age is 16, but just about, not everybody, but just about everybody gets their license. Is I turned 16 on my birth date. My driver's test was 3 days later. That's just the route that people go. Yeah. And I think in North Dakota, which I don't agree with this, North Dakota is a little bit more Wild West than Minnesota. Not Wild West, but there's just less regulation with lots of things. And you can get your permit at 14 and your license at 15. And it is very, and for what I do for my job, everything is to do with brain-based things. I'm your brain is not near, at 16, it is not near developed enough to be able to handle the responsibility of a vehicle, that sort of thing. And it's just, but it is a totally different world where I drive to work every single day, and it's miles away, and I get there in 10 minutes because I drive one exit on the interstate, go, and it's I'm there. But I would not survive long. I am jealous of the going to more events and conventions and those types of things, but I would not survive the city. I just wouldn't.
Some people are made for it and some people aren't. I am a rare breed, being a born and bred New Yorker that still lives in New York. There may come a time in my life, I don't know when it's going to happen, but there may come a time in my life where I move out of New York City. But most people move here. They don't, and most people who are born here leave here. That's the way it goes for that exact reason. They want a house, they want space, and they want, that existence, and maybe I'll get to that point at some point. But, for now, I'm a city boy, whether I like it or not. That's just embedded in me one way or the other.
Yes, I live in the place that people tend to, a lot of people stay around or go to, this or that. But I think where I grew up, when it's a small town, you have people that stay there. But a lot of people, it's the place you leave, not the place you go to. My brother's a teacher, and their cost of living for the area is pretty high because it's such a touristy spot. So it's there is a lot of really expensive homes on lakes and stuff too. So it kind of, compared to the surrounding areas, it's just a lot more expensive. But new families, young people cannot afford to move there compared to, I can move 30 minutes down the road and it's much more affordable. But in New York, if they move out of the city, where do people go? Where do they go?
A bunch of different places, honestly. A lot of people wind up moving to New Jersey. Poor souls. You can move upstate, you can move to Westchester, Yonkers, Albany, if you want to go a little bit farther up, that general area. There's plenty of places you could move to. You could move to Long Island, poor souls. You could do anything of the sort, or you literally move across the country. There's tons of people that start off here and then wind up moving to North Carolina or Virginia or Florida or somewhere on the West Coast, somewhere like Washington State, or I know people who started off here that now live in the the Tacomas of the world and stuff like that. It's if I can make it here, I'll make it anywhere is quite literally a slogan for a reason, and that's what a lot of people I know have done. And it's something that you can do. If you could survive these city streets, baby, you could make it literally anywhere if you try hard enough. Definitely. Yep.
as you can tell, I enjoyed, again, because I've never been to the state of New York. I did enjoy Chris's comments of the people of Yonkers, of it was, I don't know exactly what the context was of how it came up, but it was
that Yonkers would love to be New York City, but they're not. They had the opportunity. They had the opportunity. Chris Nautis was 100% accurate with that statement. They had the opportunity once upon a time. They passed on being part of New York City, but they still want to be part of New York City because they have the exact same tax laws. And if you step foot in Yonkers for more than 5 minutes, they're going to try to tax your ass. Like that's the way it goes. Yeah, that was our Toy Fair episode, if I remember correctly.
Okay, because I'm like, I heard this and this just made me think of it. I'm like, for whatever reason, that stood out to me. There's nothing about anything else, but it's like those are the things I guess maybe that stand out to me. It's just this random stuff that comes up.
Well, but that's something that I like to do as a podcaster as well, is like kind of like let my listeners know what life is like for me, whether it be in New York or whether it be elsewhere. Like I want to paint a picture of what things lead to me being me, if that makes any sense. You know, like I'm not going to give them day to day, obviously, but like I'll give them like at least an idea of what my life has been like, because it adds a little bit of extra character to what you're talking about on the show. Like if you were just a plain Jane, these are the comic books that I read today type of show, you know, that's great for some people, but they're going to want to know more about the host. They're going to want more know about their existence and, you know, why they decided to read what they wanted to read, like how they got started reading in the first place, you know, what it was like for them in one situation or another. And that's just the way it goes. So, yeah, I like opening up about New York life and life in general, because it just adds color to the in-between pieces.
And I think that people I think we feel this way about whether it's, you know, someone that does podcasts or whether it's something that and I think reading it to some extent too, of like, you kind of feel like, especially I think podcasts are really kind of that way where like for people that listen, they don't know you, but they kind of feel like they know you, where it's like, okay, some people have been listening to you for, you know, could be 2 decades. Like for me, it's probably been 8 years maybe. So it's like, I've never met you, but it's like, now that you're on here when we're talking and we're meeting online for the first time, it's kind of like, it feels like it's someone that I have known. And it's like, but we've never once talked before. But I think podcasts kind of can lead that connection where it's like people not only resonate with the topics, but the people that present those topics.
And that's other communities that I'm a part of as well. Like I'm a cursory member of Scott Johnson's Frog Pants community with the Morning Stream and you know, Film Sack and other shows that he's a part of. You know, I've been on the show for like call-in segments and stuff like that, or we've just conversed via email or text or voicemail message or stuff like that. But I feel like I know them a little bit better than, you know, somebody who I've literally never met and only conversed via email. You know, it's if you're hearing the voice of somebody, and especially if you're seeing their video, like that's a major step. If you're seeing them and you're hearing them, you're going to feel like you have a little bit more of a connection. Don't stalk them. That's not a good idea. But podcasters in particular, like, because you know a little bit more about their history and their day to day, like there is a little bit more of a connection there. Absolutely. If you're part of the community.
Definitely. Well, Ian, I've taken up enough of your time, but before we get out of here, let anybody listening that has made it this far know where they can find all of your stuff, how they can help support you and your podcast.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Before I do that, though, if you don't mind, I had one more thing queued up that I wanted to share with you. That's wrestling related. Just because I wasn't sure if you were going to ask this question, so I brought it up anyway. I found the link to the first ever wrestling show that I ever went to.
Oh, awesome.
Please share. It was January 29th, 1993 at Madison Square Garden. Day after my birthday. I'm January 28th, baby. And it was the day after Andre the Giant died. And I didn't know that going into it, obviously. I mean, it's 1993. You know, I was 9. And we had seats for all the way freaking up. I was with my Cub Scout troop. And I got to see the likes of El Matador defeat Skinner, Randy Savage defeating Ted DiBiase, the Head Shrinkers defeating Jim Powers and Virgil, Tatanka versus Damien Demento, Razor Ramon versus the Big Boss Man, Typhoon versus Berserker, the Steiner brothers versus the Beverly brothers, Bob Backlund versus Shawn Michaels. He actually won that via countout, so he didn't win the Intercontinental Championship, but he did take him on. Undertaker versus IRS, Mr. Perfect versus Ric Flair, and the main event, Bret Hart defending his championship against Bam Bam Bigelow.
That makes me very jealous of like think of the names on there. You've got Bam Bam, you've got Bret, you've got Flair, You've got Shawn, you've got Razor, you got Mr. Perfect. Those are some of my, there's a couple names on that list that like Bret, Shawn, and Perfect, they rank really high all time for me, which again shows how much I'm obsessed with wrestling. Where I was, Shawn, I saw a lot of his career, but the other two were strictly like after the fact, where it's just like I'm, a 10-year-old looking at these matches and stuff, but that sort of thing. But gosh, thank you for sharing that. I didn't even think to ask you that, but
no. By all means, man. I had it queued up just in case. And like, this was literally the only show that I had gone to until I was an adult, pretty much. Like I had not seen a lot of live wrestling until like my mid 20s. And then once again, those independent shows that I talked about, and then, moving on from there. But it's a moment I'll never forget, just being able to see these people, even if they were minuscule, because I was all the way up in the right. bleachers of Madison Square Garden. But it was definitely an experience I'll never forget. And wrestling fan in 1993, so hell yeah.
Yeah, and that's another thing. I mean, another New York thing. Going to the Garden also is just special too. Again, from people that don't. Maybe it's different for if you're in the area, but people that don't live there, like it's just, and it's especially for wrestling, like everything in the past has been about the Garden. Everything. So that's one that I'd like to check off my list at some point. I'm not sure when that'll happen, but at some point, I got to try to make that work. But
absolutely. But if you want to find out more about my stuff, it's all over at comictiming.net. I have links to basically everything there. YouTube channel is over at Comic Timing Podcast. We put up video episodes of just about every episode. Anything that I did record via Zoom usually winds up getting a video episode. If it's in person, it'll probably be an audio episode. But that's where you can find me. I am Sci-Fi on Blue Sky, and Comic Timing on Blue Sky as well. And we have a pretty good Facebook community also for Comic Timing. So if you go to facebook.com/comic timing, the links to that are there as well. And Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate that. I had a great time.
Absolutely. I'll have to. You're welcome back anytime. But at some point, if we have like a post pay-per-view or something, we'll have to do a little. I had Paul. I mentioned Paul Bromwell too. I had him on 2 years in a row, like on like the same month, and he's like, we got to make this an annual tradition. So I'll have to have you on again. Maybe in a year I'll have you on again, and we could talk whatever current wrestling you've watched or comics or whatever you want.
Yeah. I mean, hell, maybe Peacemaker. That's a good kind of in between between the two.
I'll be watching that. That's something that like gets added to the top of the queue for me watch wise. So there we go. That'll work too. But
excellent.
Well, thank you so much, Ian, for all your time and for everything you do. I've been a fan for quite a while, so it's been great to quote unquote meet you and have you on the show.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely, Matt. Thanks so much for having me, and I'll come back anytime.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right.